Josh here, and this is my review of the book Wicked City by Hideyuki Kikuchi. He is the author of the Vampire Hunter D series, if you're unaware, and is the inspiration for many of Yoshiaki Kawajiri's anime movies, again, if you're familiar. I say this because this is actually the source material for one of his movies, again, titled Wicked City, which was actually kind of a bad movie, so to be honest, it's kind of strange that I was looking forward to this book, but something lingered in my mind about it, and I really enjoyed the world that it created. And this novel, frankly, delivered on many of the things that I was originally expecting, or originally was left wanting after seeing the movie. I've never seen the apparently dreadful live-action movie, so I'm going to exclude all discussion on that. There'll be little comparison between the movie and the book, though, because frankly, the book is its own entity and really functions on a different level, whereas the movie focused on, frankly, almost a pornographic level. It really didn't pull off what I thought it was going for. The book, on the other hand, has a very distinct way of going about things that really kind of pushes this material, which is, frankly, kind of generic, into a level of great enjoyment. Now, before I say anything further, I do want to clarify that you do not need to call 911 on me if you know the material, because it is frankly kind of disturbing in portions, but not nearly as bad as the anime. I'll get to that in a little bit, though. To start, the story revolves around Taki Renzaburo, who doubles as a regular worker during the day, and a member of the Blackguard by night, who is kind of a telekinetically enhanced person who guards the peace between the human world and the overlapping demon world, the Black World. The story revolves around him protecting one Giuseppe Maillart, who is the main benefactor behind a human-demon treaty that will last 500 years for the course of one night to the next morning. But he is paired with a female guard, a blackguard, from the side of the demons. And this novel is basically, like I said, it's a basic action novel, and you get a lot of what you expect, but there is a lot of really great pointed things about this novel. For one, I think the voice of it is very clear, whereas the movie didn't really find a voice, didn't really have a chance for much of a voice. They go out of their way to make Taki here, our main character, a very hard-boiled hero in a classic sense. He's very much a man's man, kind of a chauvinist. The story actually starts out with a very amusing situation with him going to his favorite strip club after hours, going to the same girl he always does. It's a very classic hard-boiled situation, but the book quickly turns it into something that you would not expect, and it's frankly quite frightening. Especially being a male. At any rate, though, the novel works because of this voice. It really gives it a fast-reading feel. It allows for the course of a lot of exposition without actually slowing down the pacing of the novel, which is something very great, because it allows for the pacing of the novel to keep up. This is a very fast-paced action novel, but also manages to stuff in quite a bit of world building without feeling terribly intrusive, and there is some very good world building here, quite a bit of good alternate history details, I would think, and some cool kind of in-joke references that normally you'd groan at in other things, but somehow they managed to play off quite nicely here. I'm thinking of one in particular with George A. Romero. You could probably guess where that's going. But I think the story works largely because of its mix of genres and its general tone. This novel is very much a pulpy novel, and it maintains a pulpy tone. It's self-aware, I think is the best way to put it, because while Taki, our main hero and our main voice of the novel, is a very hard-boiled classic action hero, the book goes out of his way, and Hideyuki Kikuchi goes out of his way to skewer his personality, showing us that deep down, and really, he's not that much of a classic hard-boiled hero, and really not even that much of a tough guy, despite what we initially think of him, and it really goes a long way of inverting our thoughts about him throughout the novel. It's an interesting main character, I think, with a lot more depth than many might give him credit for, especially if only seeing the anime. One thing I do have to complain about, though, is, again, another fault of the anime, too, is that the romance in this book is really not convincing, particularly because there is some very graphic sexual situations that I will get into in a second, and really makes one late-game twist. Anyone that's seen the movie will know. It's still not very convincing, to put it lightly, but the tepid end to a novel is really not that much of a death blow, considering the fact that the rest of the novel is very enjoyable. It really mixes this kind of ultra-modern, by contrast, the book was written in 1985, but it's not really that dated, thankfully. Really, this kind of ultra-modern Tokyo but this ancient world of demons and eldritch spaces and monks, spiritual shields, really mixes these things together very nicely. And you've seen this in other things before, of course, but it's played off very nicely here. And like I said, it really finds that great tone that makes it all seem believable. The main the main translator for this book really does deserve a lot of credit for the success of this novel. I think for anyone who's read the Vampire Hunter D novels, they can attest to the fact that while they are good novels, don't get me wrong, the voice is very stiff of them, perhaps purposefully so, but it makes them quite a dry read at times, despite a lot of the action. And that's one thing too. I think the action was translated very poorly in some of the Vampire Hunter D novels. Granted, I've only read up to 6. It's already like 14 out or something like that. But anyway, the translation, you really can't even notice that it was written in another language, because the translator really did. I don't know if they changed a lot of things, but it worked really quite nicely. There's the occasional term that you may be a little confused by, but otherwise not too much of a problem. One thing I did want to mention too is a lot of the book works because of this whole kind of timed thing, where it's all of it takes place over one night, and in particular, every encounter with assaulting demons trying to stop the treaty, which is inevitably what the plot becomes about, is very interesting because of the author's sometimes really, really in-depth detail based on what these creatures are capable of and what their transformations are, because honestly, there is some pretty sick shit in here. It's kind of a mix between Cronenbergian psychosexual horror and John Carpenter's body horror, and really is quite disgusting, I gotta say, but it works for the most part. One side that it does work on is any encounters that are meant to be horrific. It generally achieves that goal almost every time. On the other hand, the one I did mention before, it really plays against the book sometimes, because I'm just going to come right out and say it, there's a lot of rape in this book, and that's really off-putting, honestly. It's really distasteful, and it really doesn't work in the terms of the plot, especially in light of the romantic subplot. It really kind of destroys that, I think. But at the same time, I don't think it's crippling for the novel. It's definitely disturbing, maybe not in the way the author intended. It's actually kind of played for titillation, which is really weird if you think about it, but the novel really does succeed in spite of this, I think, in spite of it. And it's definitely worth checking out if you're a fan of kind of hardcore urban fantasy. And I don't mean hardcore sexual, I just mean hardcore as in very dark. And maybe if you're a fan of just general horror novels, body horror in particular. There's some really great descriptions in here, like I said, that will really make you wish you couldn't imagine what the author was saying. Very imaginative. And overall, I think that's what this novel really generally excels at. It's something you've definitely seen before, kind of a patchwork of things you've seen before, but played off with a really great execution. And that's as much as I can say about this novel, in all honesty. I really don't want to go too much in depth with it, because I don't want to spoil too many things. If you're going to read this book, this is a light novel, and I did want to mention, I did say it was peppered with illustrations, and it is. But this novel doesn't really have a great balance of these things. At the beginning, there's some good ones, and at the end, there's some great ones. But honestly, there's really not a whole lot in the middle at all to speak of, which is quite a disappointment. I actually forgot that it had illustrations by the time they popped up in the end again, which is, like I said, really needs better balance in that. But I don't think that's not the author's fault, per se. That's the illustrator's fault, I think, or at least the publisher's fault. So, should you actually read Wicked City? That's tough to say, in all honesty. It is one of those things where you're either going to enjoy it or you're going to hate it. I think loving it might be a little hard, but you're going to enjoy it or you're going to hate it, because there's some really weird shit in here, and some of that weird shit really works, and some of that weird shit really doesn't. It's kind of up to a matter of personal taste, but if you can look past a few really weird situations, I think this is actually quite a good book. I really enjoyed it, despite the, again, kind of tepid end that didn't really make a whole lot of sense, and some plot holes. This novel really was worth checking out. There's some great pacing. As a light novel, under 300 pages, it managed to pack a lot of that in there. Though it does lose steam in its final quarter, it is definitely worth reading up until then, I think. Don't call 911, please.